There's my husband disappearing. Okay, I'm live on everything now, apparently. Does it not show? It says it's telling my followers it should have told you. Let's see if it's on your... There, right there.
Hey everyone.
Uh-oh, now we're going to get terrible feedback or whatever. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm doing, this is really weird because I can't see everything on my camera because I put my camera up next to my other camera. Okay. Did you watch the video and what did you think? And by the way, if I've had you on my show before, I'd be happy to have you back on right now. If I don't know you, then I'm a little leery. Oh, I've got somebody from Brazil. That's lovely. I love Brazil. I've never been there. I'd like to go one day. Okay, so I just watched the video and I'll be honest, super creepy. But I've never been good at watching myself do much of anything. So it's no surprise that I found it kind of creepy. But I'm happy to talk to you about your comments. Miss you too, Tina. Lovely. And Dan, thank you for finding me. And all of you people. Oh, there's my husband. See, the problem is I can't see it because I've totally jerry-rigged this stupid thing. Wait, I'm just going to move this over so that I can see it some more. There. Now I can see you. And you got a better glimpse of my whole studio. So I got two cameras going because Instagram just logged me out. And then I went on Instagram to try to log in because you can only go live on Instagram if you get the key live on Instagram on StreamYard if you get the key from your computer app. And so I went on the computer and it won't let me log in. So I said, okay, so redo my password. So it redid my password and it logged me into Kevin's Instagram. So now my Instagram only exists apparently on my phone. It's the weirdest thing. Thank you for that comment that those 8 minutes just flew by. I will tell you, I've got like, what's the word? Okay, I'm not going to say post whatever, but when I was doing the talk, I was very, very ill. I was so ill. It was literally all I could do to get through the talk. I actually, truth be told, I dropped a line because as I reached the end of the talk, like I knew that I was almost done, and then I like hurried and I dropped a line. I was like, oh, I'm almost done. I was so sick that day. And I will say that everybody in my group, and I think they've developed a playlist. So if you just let it play further, it'll play some of the other speakers or all of the other speakers in my group, in my flight at TEDx Lake Mary. You can see them all. And it was such a diverse group, crazy, different topics. It was very cool, I have to say. It was a really great experience. Hey, Kelly, thank you for joining me here. And I recommend it. It's a great way to hone your message. TEDx sort of prides itself on the message being very simple, one action step. And so that's why you didn't hear my whole tirade about why homeschooling is so much better than public schooling, because they want you to hone in on one simple idea to change the world, one simple idea worth sharing. I think that's like their tagline. And then give a single action step to the audience so that this one step will at least get them on the path. And I love that. I love that about TED and TEDx. And so that's what I did. I honed it down. And it was very good for me also to focus in on that one point. Children are naturally curious. And so if I were to elaborate on that, for instance, if I were to do a second TEDx, I would focus on the fact that children are naturally curious and therefore they will naturally learn. And we've lost our faith in our children because the schools have trained us to think that school is necessary for learning. And it so isn't. It's not even close. Not even close. School impedes learning. School inhibits learning. School is a deterrent to learning, actually. And honestly, for a few people, this is why we believe in school, because there are those few, maybe as much as 10%, although I'm going to say probably less than that, much less than that, actually. The anxiety provoking environment, the competition, the testing, the grading, the teacher-student relationship, there are a few children who thrive in that environment. I was not one of them. Thank you for the comment. You are a rock star. I love that. Thank you. Very kind. So, such a great point. Yes, curiosity is absolutely inborn, a tremendous gift from God. One has to do something to disinterest kids from learning. True. So for the parent to work with that and not against it is so brilliantly stated by you. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Such a difficult concept to embrace because we've all been trained. We've all been trained in school. And that's why in the talk, I talk a little bit. I mean, I had 8 minutes, right? But I talk a little bit about how how these lessons had been ingrained in me from a very young, and by the way, from a very young age. Like, here's the thing. If you've got small kids, just don't put them in school. Don't do it until, like, think that maybe by the age of 10, you'll put them in school. Like, but seriously, consider a 5-year-old doesn't need school. A 6-year-old doesn't need school. A 7-year-old doesn't need school. In fact, they don't even need to read. They just don't. They're children. 8 years old, yeah, maybe sit down with the 8-year-old and say, hey, it's time you learn to read. You're growing up. You need to take some responsibility for your life. And part of that is learning to read. Like it's part of a thing, right? But we don't approach it like that. We approach it like, wow, how soon can I drop my kid off at daycare? And we're entrusting our children, our very pride and joy, to strangers. So I'm not going to go into all the horror stories of daycare, but there are lots of them. Steve writes, the average preschooler asks 400 plus questions daily, but only a few short months in a classroom is enough to convince most children that learning is not fun and the world is not an interesting place after all. And that is tragic. Totally agree with that. By the way, it would be great if you could copy your comments and paste them on the talk. Same comments over on the talk would be so awesome. Thank you also, by the way. And my husband just wrote, remember, our founding fathers were all homeschooled. I've taught him so well. Love you, sweetie. So, and also, by the way, this was the first time that he's seen it, because when I gave the talk, he had just had knee surgery. And I know many of you have followed his knee surgery saga. It's not really a saga, but he's doing better and better every day. We were institutionally trained to be passive receptacles, not proactive discoverers. Parents have the privilege to turn that around. And this is why I think that there is some room here to save the nation. And that the saving of the nation will be found by homeschoolers, because the founding of the nation was by homeschoolers. So of course, turning this around would be by homeschoolers, because they're the people who can think outside the box. And I'm talking like metaphorically, but also physically, like they can think outside the school walls. When you go to school, you're trained to think inside the parameters. So for instance, if the teacher gives you a problem to solve, and the solution is like the car, I'm not going to come up with a good example, but the solution is something that is sort of outside the parameters of what she's willing to engage with. You're disallowed the solution, even though it is a solution, which is why, we laugh at the tests. Find X, right? On the test, you got an equation, X plus 2 equals 7, find X. And the answer is, I circle the X and I point an arrow and I say, there's X, I found it for you. That's not acceptable. But why not? Be more specific in what you're asking for. How about that? How about you be more specific with your questions instead of telling me that I'm not allowed to think outside of the parameters of your limited imagination, right? Okay, let's see this one. Kelly writes, my grade school report cards all said I stared out the window and wasn't paying attention. Truth is, I just wanted to explore. Public school squashed that curiosity. Years later in grad school, I got an A++ in one of the hardest science classes. I learned when I was ready to. Absolutely. Well, that's the other thing. That's going to be my second talk, because I love math. I've always loved math. And it pains me to hear people say, oh, I can't do math. I don't have a math brain. Because I tutored math, and I tutored calculus, and I tutored a young woman in calculus who went to Duke University. So she was no slouch. And she showed up and said to me, if you can get me to a D- on my final, which is basically what, 40% or something like that, like ridiculously low score, then my professor won't fail me and I'll at least pass the class and I won't have to take the class again. Please, please, please help me. And I said, okay, let's see what we can do, thinking this was going to be an abysmal failure because because she just thought she was stupid. And I tutored her to a B+ on the final. The professor wrote her and said he had never seen such improvement in a student. Well, of course he didn't. If he was condemning the students that for some reason didn't learn well from him to failure, if he was just condemning them because because he was incapable of communicating with them, then of course he wouldn't see improvement in his students. I never got a chance to talk to him. I wasn't as bold then as I am now. But my point is, she had been convinced that she was a loser. And that's the last thing that we should want to have happen for our children. Ever. My son had learned his geometric shapes, and on a 3rd grade test, it asked, what shape is the world? His answer was sphere. It was counted as wrong because the answer was a circle. So that's when you pull your child out of school, because they are wrong to correct him. They're idiots to correct him. How dare they? Unless the teacher's a flat earther, in which case, pull him out of school. It's like, what? Come on. So, the horror stories abound. The horror stories of what was coming out of school are what's coming out of school now, of course, are the worst. But then again, did you guys see, we just had a doctor testify on Capitol Hill. She refused to answer the question of how many genders there are. Just how many? 2. A preschooler knows the answer to that question, but now a board certified medical physician does not. I mean, well, we have a woman sitting I can't say she's a woman, although she was chosen because she was a woman, but she can't define woman, but she sits on the Supreme Court, but she doesn't know what a woman is. Which incidentally, I tweeted the other day, if Ketanji Brown Jackson doesn't know what a woman is because she's not a biologist, shouldn't she support letting biology decide gender? Biology does dictate gender, but she refutes it, but says that she can't define gender because she's not a biologist. There's a problem with her reasoning, and she's a Supreme Court justice. The public education system, no. We call it the public school system because it's not an education system. Is sort of a sorting machine. You have a bad day and end up in a dustbin. Ooh, it's a crude setup if you ask me. I totally agree with that. Thank you for weighing in. That is the public school system. It is a dustbin. It's rigging the game. And the kids who understand that the game is rigged and decide that they don't want to play are better off than the kids who are in the game don't know that it's rigged and keep trying. And I think that that's sort of the ruse of public schools or government schools, is they trick us into staying to play. Wasn't it something about how she didn't deny that men could have babies? That's correct. You're correct. It was about how she wouldn't deny that men could have. Can men have babies? You're absolutely correct. Sorry about that. Can men have babies? I sort of equate the two, forgive me, but yes. Can men have babies? Well, that's you're asking a political question. No, I'm not asking a truth question. They are slipping a little thought control on the kids too. They're slipping a lot of thought control on the children. And now with AI, I'll just say this because I don't want this to go on for too long, but please be careful with AI. We are being groomed to think, ooh, AI, new technology, pretty cool. We were also groomed to think that about the shots. I'm just saying. We were groomed to think that about school ages and ages ago. Ooh, new technology, this is good. We were groomed to think that about television and all of this stuff. And now the AI is coming, and there are a lot of voices out there saying, oh, whoa, back the truck up. Let's talk about this. Let's do some research. Let's figure out if this is actually going to be a net good. I won't deny that there might be some good, but it depends on the application. And a lot of this, they're just bringing into schools without testing. Look, they brought in whole word reading into the schools without testing. Whole word reading set back reading for an entire generation of children back in the 60s. I think it was the 60s or the early 70s. Because what it did was it had the children memorize basically the shapes of the words as words. And so if bed looks like a bed, right? BED looks like a bed. And so they would memorize those letters together to be the word bed, but they couldn't sound anything out, which limited their vocabulary, greatly limited their vocabulary, which made reading anything that had any new words in it too strenuous, basically, too difficult for them. And it disabled an entire generation of children. And they never apologized, and they adopted it without testing before. So they just said, well, this is new. This is going to be great. And that's a lie. Okay, I've been testing AI with problems. I know the answers too. Okay, and it's right about 60% of the time, half right about 20%, and a complete lie about 20%. I wouldn't trust it. So now you're talking about the AI that say we have access to, which is a great point. In fact, there's a lawyer that got a huge smackdown because his entire case was predicated on a case that actually didn't exist, that his AI helper made up for him. And so he did this whole argument, but the case didn't exist. There was no case law like that. And now he's suffering the consequences. The AI that they're putting in children's hands, though, is like friend AI, buddy AI. And we've already seen that there was an AI program, it's a Google chatbot thing that convinced a young man to commit suicide, I think, or perhaps somebody else to kill his parents. Like it's evil. It got evil with him. There's a court case about this right now. And we are because technology evolves so quickly, we're hurrying to get it out there to go see it and stuff. I just think that we're playing a very dangerous game with our children. There, the secret is to become a teammate and learning partner going on a learning adventure together, rather than feeling obligated to have every answer and shortchanging your child from the joy of discovery and curiosity. You nailed this, Sam. Thank you for working Inconvenient Truths. So this is from Steve Lambert, and I just realized that I'm actually putting the posts up on the stream. And Steve Lambert is one of the co-creators, I think I can say, of 5 in a Row, which is a curriculum for smaller children that's phenomenal, that rocked my world when I first found it and made me wish that I could zap my children back to being younger again. And he gets it. He understands, and he's been in this game for a very, very long time. The education realm, I will say. So let's see. These are the long ones. So I guess, as you're describing, it breaks my heart that so many children feel debased by the system. My mom, now 88, taught for 30 years in an earlier era. She became a teacher precisely to help children discover the joy of learning you described in your talk. However, she found it hard to accomplish due to the monolithic nature of the system. Her end of career summary, that even when teachers desire real discovery for kids, by grade 3, that inborn curiosity had been suffocated by the system. Yeah. Yep. No kidding. Now the problem is I don't know how to get it off. Hide. There we go. Oh, look at that. I did it. So we have a real struggle because so many people have been convinced by their own schooling that they're incompetent, which ought to tell them they shouldn't put their children in school, but somehow they think, and I believe this is a whole sort of mind shift thing that happens, that I'm incompetent, but that's my fault. It's not the system's fault. And the system somehow will do better for my child because my child somehow is perfectly geared to the system, but I wasn't. Does that make sense? And it's wrong. It's a complete lie. So my goal is to try to teach people, teach parents in particular, that they are enough. In fact, I was on the set the other day. I shot a film called The Flood about Noah. I played Miriam, his wife. Accounts apparently believe that perhaps her name was Miriam, that it was very likely somehow that her name was Miriam, even though it's not actually in the Bible. But anyway, and a guy shows up and he said, I met you at NRB and you convinced me to homeschool my children. And I met both his kids, who are super precocious and lovely little children. I can't remember, 10 and 8, something like that. And he's been homeschooling them. He does virtual online, like he does public school online, and they're still better off. And I said, okay, please stop doing that. Oh my gosh. He actually is like, he's an investor. He does stock trading and stuff, and he does real estate, and he's very successful. And I'm like, do you not think that you have anything to offer your children? Like, teach them what you do. Like, show them that. By the way, your children are infinitely more interested in you, the parent, than they would ever be in a teacher at school. And typically, a teacher at school, I'm sorry to say, not to diss on teachers, because there are some really great teachers, but they only have studied to be teachers. So they don't know a whole lot. Whereas so many entrepreneurs, like this guy, know a whole lot of everything because he kind of has to. So I'm just saying, there's that. So let's see. Thank you so much for joining me for this. It's been a pleasure chatting with you all. And if you would please like and share the video with like your entire friend group and even people you don't know, I'm just saying, I would really appreciate it because I'm just trying to get this message out there. And this was an exciting milestone for me, even though I was very ill. Oh my gosh, it was so bad. And thank you so much. Let's see if I missed things. AI shows how easy it is to fool people. It can be a great tool for good, but so much of it is scary. It's true. Led people to commit suicide. I have friends in college who wrote essays completely on their own. Their professor said their machine told them half was written by AI, and they assume the student is lying without proof. That's tough. Like, I don't even know what to do with that. And the problem is, these days, I mean, we can totally get into this. We've got a real problem with all of the fraud that's happening in the daycare centers, Somalia, whatever, all of that stuff. And this idea that if you game the system and you cheat, you will win in the end and you'll be better off, when anybody who's lived any length of time knows that cheating feels bad and you feel bad, which means you're going to have a bad life. we've got a big problem with AI because all the kids are going to start using it. They'll never write. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to say writing is thinking. So when you write, it forces your brain to think, to process. I'll tell you a quick story. We had a caregiver come in for my mother-in-law who is ailing. And this was a person who could not think. She could not use her brain. She could not retain a thought. And she passed nursing school. And my daughter said, Mom, how could she pass nursing? Like, this is terrible. She's, caregiver school, whatever school these people go to be qualified to come into people's homes or whatever. And I said, because the nursing schools have figured out that it's a money play. And so as long as you come up with the money and the government lends you the money to go to nursing school, they're kind of obliged to pass you. My daughter told me that the woman said to her that she didn't graduate high school till she was 18 because they held her back. And I'm like, you think? Like, maybe they shouldn't have graduated her. Like, she could not retain a thought. She was sadly very unclever. And that's what we're turning out from our schools. We're turning out children who can't even follow directions anymore. And it used to be who could only follow directions, which was bad enough. Josiah, I'm sorry to hear that about your friends. Let's see. Children are communicating with AI and listening to it instead of their parents. It's making it so much more difficult for parents to stay on top. Yeah, for sure. To stay on top of things. The AI is not the be all and end all that a lot of people are thinking that it is. And parents, you have to get your children off the devices. In fact, what's very encouraging is so many young people, I'm saying Gen Z, right, youth, are like done with their devices. My daughter sadly just took herself off of all social media. I say sadly because that's how I brag about her. Technology is still needed. It's just we have to sort out what is needed and good for our lives. Yes, for sure, Yenny. I agree with that. Sorry, I'm just reading the Instagram. AI writes the essay, then grades the essay it wrote and gives itself an A. Yeah, it's true because professors can use AI to grade their things also. Wishing best, thank you. That's lovely. Well, Sam, they are dependent of what the school taught them, and it's not enough for the world today. I mean, the problem is, this has been going on. 20 years ago, I reported on this, that English college professors are saying they have to go back to teaching high school English for children because the children that are entering as freshmen can't write at all. And I will say, I remember learning how to write a standard essay. There's a formula. It's fairly simple, just like there's a formula for the TEDx talk. And by the way, if anybody has any questions about TEDx, I'm happy to answer them. There's a formula for the proper essay. And once you know the formula, once you have been able to practice that formula, you can diverge somewhat from the formula, but there's a reason that there's a formula because it's effective. And I remember learning it in high school, but I guess I wasn't ready to learn it. And I was convinced that I was all math and science, so I didn't think I wanted to learn it or whatever. And so I didn't learn it. Then I had to relearn it when I got to college. And in college, it was actually my a friend of mine that I met in college who taught me the standard English essay because he was like an English and history guy. And so he showed me how to write a standard essay. And I went, oh, there's a formula, even though the formula had been drilled into us in high school and I remembered it, but it never computed. Now, that could be on me, could be on the teacher, but I did go to college. And after I wrote my first essay and got like a terrible grade on it, I was like, wow, how did that happen? And I felt like a complete failure. Well, I was a complete failure because it didn't compute at the time. And I think that if we take the institution out from the equation, we will have better luck with our children. I guess that's my point. So thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I will say goodbye here. And